The most dangerous man in the city walked into his kitchen ready for a fight, only to be disarmed by a girl in a pink dress. John Sanders didn't expect anyone to be in his mansion at this hour. The catering staff should have left an hour ago. His men were securing the perimeter outside. He was alone, or so he thought. Then he heard it. Not the click of a safety being turned off. Not the whisper of conspirators. Just the quiet scrape of a fork against ceramic, coming from somewhere near the commercial refrigerators. His hand moved to the gun holstered beneath his jacket. Every tattoo on his chest seemed to tighten like armor preparing for battle. In his world, unexpected sounds after midnight meant someone had gotten bold. And bold people didn't leave his property breathing. He moved through the doorway in complete silence, his shadow falling across the tiles before he did. And there she was. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting cross-legged on his kitchen floor. Her pink velvet dress was too formal for the setting, like she'd been dressed for church but ended up here instead. In her small hands was a white plate, and on that plate, cold pasta leftovers from the evening's event, the kind his staff usually scraped into the trash. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was eating. When she looked up and saw him standing there, his jacket open to reveal the intricate web of ink covering his torso dragons. Skulls, names of the dead, she didn't scream. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, but not with the terror he was used to seeing. It was something else. Something that looked almost like concern. "Are you hungry too, Mr. Giant?" She held out the fork toward him, a single piece of penne speared on the tines, offering it to the tattooed stranger looming over her like he might need it more than she did. John Sanders, who had made grown men weep with a look, who had built an empire on the bones of anyone foolish enough to cross him, stood frozen in his own kitchen, completely disarmed by a child's kindness. For the first time in 30 years, he had no idea what to do. Stay with me until the end. Because what John Sanders did next changed everything, not just for this little girl, but for the man who thought he'd lost his humanity, somewhere between his first kill and his 100th. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. John Sanders had spent 2 decades carving his name into the city's underworld. His reputation was a weapon sharper than any blade, silent, brutal, absolute. People who knew his name knew to look away. The tattoos covering his body weren't decoration. They were a resume written in ink, each one a testament to survival, to violence, to choices that left scars deeper than the ones on his skin. His mansion was a fortress dressed as a home, all dark wood and cold marble, the kind of place where laughter died before it reached the ceiling. Every inch of it screamed power, control, dominance. But standing in that kitchen, staring down at Nancy Harrison, in her pink dress, clutching that fork like it was the most precious thing in the world, John felt something inside his chest crack open, something he thought he'd buried the day he stopped being a man and became a monster. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to him. Not here. And yet, here she was, proof that even in the darkest corners of his world, innocence could still find a way in. John's brain couldn't process what was happening. His hand was still on the gun. His pulse was still hammering from the adrenaline of expecting a threat. And this child, this tiny girl drowning in pink velvet, was offering him pasta like they were neighbors at a potluck. The word died in his throat. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been speechless. Threats, negotiations, interrogations, he always had the right words, the ones that cut deepest. But this? Nancy's arm was still extended, the fork trembling slightly in her small hand. She was scared. He could see it in the way her shoulders hunched, in how her eyes kept darting between his face and the tattoos crawling up his neck. But she was holding that fork out anyway, like good manners were more important than self-preservation. "There's more in the fridge," she whispered, her voice so quiet he almost missed it. "The nice lady with the apron said they were throwing it away. I thought maybe you didn't eat yet. You look really tired, Mr. Giant." Mr. Giant. Not sir, not his name, which she clearly didn't know. Just an observation from a child who saw a big, scary man and decided he must need food. John slowly removed his hand from inside his jacket. The movement made Nancy flinch, but she didn't drop the fork, didn't pull it back, just kept holding it out like an olive branch made of carbohydrates. He crouched down, his knees cracking, until he was at her eye level. Up close, he could see how thin she was. The dress hung loose around her frame. There were shadows under her eyes that no 8-year-old should have, and the pasta on her plate, she'd eaten maybe half of it, but she was offering him the rest. "You should eat that," he said finally, his voice rougher than he intended. "It's yours." Nancy shook her head, blonde hair swishing across her shoulders. "Mommy says sharing is important, and you're really big. You probably need more food than me." There it was again. That word, Mommy. Someone had brought this child into his home, hidden her here while they worked, and now she was sitting on his floor at midnight, rationing leftovers like they were the last meal she'd see for days. John's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. The anger rising in his chest wasn't directed at the girl, it was for whoever had put her in this position, for whatever circumstances had led to a child eating garbage on a kitchen floor while wearing her Sunday best. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nancy." She finally lowered the fork, sensing maybe that he wasn't going to hurt her. "Nancy Harrison. I'm 7 3/4. "Nancy." He let the name settle. "Where's your mommy right now?" The girl's eyes went wide with panic, and suddenly that fork was a weapon again, not pointed at him, but clutched against her chest like she could shield her mother with it. "Please don't be mad at her. She didn't know I came. I hid in her car. It's not her fault." The sound of running footsteps echoed through the hallway, frantic and uneven, like someone sprinting in shoes not made for it. John's head snapped toward the doorway just as a woman in a black catering uniform came skidding into the kitchen, her face drained of all color. "Nancy!" The name tore out of her like a prayer and a curse combined. The woman Patricia. He assumed stopped dead when she saw him crouched on the floor next to her daughter. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went from Nancy to John, to the gun-shaped bulge still visible under his jacket, and every worst-case scenario played out across her face in real time. "Mr. Sanders, Her voice cracked. She moved forward instinctively, positioning herself between him and Nancy even though he was still on his knees. "Please, sir, she's just a child. She doesn't understand. I told her to stay in the pantry. I told her not to move. This is my fault. Completely my fault." Nancy scrambled to her feet, the plate clattering forgotten on the tile. "Mommy, I got hungry. I'm sorry. I just wanted. Go back to the pantry. Now." Patricia's voice had that sharp edge of parental fear, the kind that came from seeing your child in danger. But Nancy didn't move. She just stood there, looking between her mother and John like she was trying to figure out who was in more trouble. Patricia took another step forward, her hands raised like she was approaching a wild animal. Her fingers were shaking. John could see the telltale red marks on her palms, the kind you got from carrying heavy trays for hours, from scrubbing dishes in water too hot, from work that ground you down to nothing. "Mr. Sanders, I swear to God, I will leave right now. You'll never see us again. I'll pay back whatever she ate. Just, please." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Please don't hurt her." The words hit him like a physical blow. Don't hurt her. That's what she thought he was going to do. That's what his reputation had earned him, a terrified mother begging for her daughter's life because the child had eaten leftovers from his trash. John stood slowly, deliberately, keeping his movements controlled. Patricia flinched anyway, pulling Nancy behind her skirt. "How long?" he asked quietly. Patricia blinked. "What? How long have you been bringing her to work?" The question seemed to knock something loose in Patricia. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes filled with tears she was fighting desperately to hold back. 2 weeks. I swear, Mr. Sanders. Just 2 weeks. My sitter disappeared. I couldn't afford another one. I can't afford anything right now. But I never let her leave the pantry. She's always quiet. She never bothers anyone. Tonight was the first time she... "The pantry," John interrupted, his voice flat. "You've been hiding your daughter in a pantry for 2 weeks. Patricia's silence was answer enough. Patricia was already moving, her hand gripping Nancy's shoulder as she steered her toward the door. "We'll go, right now. I'll collect my things and we'll be out in 5 minutes. You won't have to see us again. I promise." Her voice was steady now, resigned in a way that told John this wasn't the first time she'd been forced to pack up and disappear. This was survival mode, the kind of calm that came from having no other choice but to keep moving. Nancy stumbled as her mother pushed her forward, the pink dress tangling around her legs. "Mommy, my plate, leave it." Patricia didn't look back at the pasta scattered across the floor. Didn't look at John. Just kept her eyes fixed on the exit like it was the only thing keeping her together. John stepped sideways, his body filling the doorway before Patricia could reach it. She stopped so abruptly that Nancy bumped into her back. For a moment, nobody moved. Patricia's breathing was ragged, her chest rising and falling like she'd just run a marathon. Her eyes met his, and in them John saw something he recognized, the look of someone who'd been cornered too many times, who knew exactly how this ended. "Please," she whispered. "I'll work the rest of the month for free. I'll clean. I'll do anything. Just let us leave." "Where are you going?" John's voice was quiet, but it cut through the kitchen like a blade. That's not your concern, Mr. Sanders. Answer the question." Patricia's jaw clenched. She pulled Nancy closer, wrapping both arms around her daughter now. "We have a place. It's fine." "You're lying." The accusation hung in the air. Patricia's face crumpled for just a second, before she forced it back into that mask of desperate composure. "We have a car. It's warm enough. Nancy has blankets. We're managing." "A car." John said it like he was testing the weight of the words. "You've been living in a car. It's temporary. I'm saving up for a deposit on an apartment. I just need a few more weeks of shifts, and you've been bringing her here because it's warmer than the car, because at least here she can eat something." John wasn't asking anymore. He was putting the pieces together, each one landing like a fist to his chest. "How long have you been homeless, Patricia?" She flinched at the word. "We're not homeless. We have the car. We have—" "How long?" 3 months. The confession came out broken, like it physically hurt to say it out loud. "The rent went up. I couldn't. I tried, but I couldn't make it work. And then the fees started piling up. And the loans. And I thought if I could just work enough shifts." Her voice trailed off into nothing. Nancy pressed her face into her mother's side, her small hands clutching the black fabric of the uniform. John didn't move from the doorway. "You're not leaving." Patricia's eyes went wide. "What?" "Not tonight. Not like this." John turned and walked toward the industrial refrigerator without another word. Patricia remained frozen in place, her arms still wrapped around Nancy like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The sound of the refrigerator door opening echoed through the silent kitchen. He started pulling containers out. The good stuff, the catered meal his guests had barely touched. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables that probably cost more per pound than Patricia made in a day, fresh bread, still warm in its cloth wrapping, a pasta dish with actual truffle oil, not the leftover red sauce Nancy had been eating off the floor. "Sit down." He gestured toward the large marble dining table in the corner, the one his staff used for prep work. Patricia didn't move. "Mr. Sanders, I'm not asking." He set the containers down on the table with deliberate thuds. "Sit down." Nancy tugged on her mother's uniform. "Mommy, I'm still hungry." That broke something in Patricia. She walked to the table like a prisoner approaching the gallows, pulled out one of the chairs, and sat Nancy down first. Then she stood behind her daughter, hands on the back of the chair, refusing to sit herself. John pulled out another chair, the legs scraping against tile. He pointed at it. "You too. I already ate." "Bullshit." The word came out harder than he intended. Patricia flinched. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" She didn't answer. Just stood there, her fingers gripping the chair so hard her knuckles went white. John opened the containers one by one, the smell of expensive food filling the kitchen. He placed a plate in front of Nancy first, then slid another toward the empty chair. Nancy's eyes went wide at the salmon, like she'd never seen anything like it before. She probably hadn't. "Eat," John said to Nancy. Then he looked up at Patricia. "Both of you." Patricia finally sat, but she didn't reach for the food. She just watched her daughter pick up a fork with trembling hands, watched her take the first careful bite like she was afraid it might disappear. John leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and just observed. Nancy ate like she'd been taught manners but had forgotten them in the face of real hunger. Quick, efficient bites, barely pausing to breathe. Patricia picked at her plate, taking small portions, her eyes constantly flicking between her daughter and John, like she was waiting for him to snatch it all away. That's when John really saw her. Not the uniform or the fear or the desperation. He saw how her collarbones jutted out sharp beneath her shirt, how her wrists looked too thin for the weight of the trays she'd been carrying all night, how her cheeks were hollow in a way that spoke of meals skipped, of food given to a daughter instead of eaten herself. She'd been serving 100 guests tonight. Plates piled high with food that cost more than her weekly paycheck. And she'd eaten nothing. 20 minutes later, Nancy had eaten everything on her plate and half of her mother's. Patricia had pushed most of her food toward her daughter when she thought John wasn't looking. He'd noticed but said nothing. "We should go," Patricia said finally, standing and smoothing down her uniform like she could somehow restore dignity through pressed fabric. "It's late. Nancy needs to sleep." John pushed off the counter. "I'll walk you out." "That's not necessary." "Wasn't asking." Patricia's shoulders tensed, but she didn't argue. She took Nancy's hand and headed toward the staff exit at the back of the mansion. John followed a few steps behind, watching the way Nancy's eyes were already drooping, the way Patricia kept adjusting her grip to keep her daughter upright. The night air hit them cold and sharp. The parking lot behind the mansion was mostly empty now, just a few catering vans still being loaded. Patricia walked past all of them, past the nice cars that belonged to his regular staff, all the way to the dark corner where the overflow parking started. That's when John saw it. A sedan that might have been silver once but was now mostly rust and primer. The back window was covered with cardboard and duct tape. One taillight was shattered, and through the windows John's stomach turned. He could see blankets, pillows, a small stuffed animal pressed against the glass, trash bags that probably held everything they owned. This wasn't just their car. This was their home. Patricia opened the back door and helped Nancy climb inside, tucking her into what looked like a nest made of every blanket and jacket they could find. The little girl curled up immediately, her pink dress disappearing under layers of fabric. "It's actually pretty warm once the engine runs for a bit," Patricia said, her voice brittle and defensive. She wasn't looking at John. "And the parking lot at the grocery store 2 miles from here has good lighting, security cameras. It's safe." John stood there, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Safe. She was calling a broken-down car in a grocery store parking lot safe, because it was the best option she had. Patricia closed the back door gently, then moved to the driver's side. Her hand was on the handle when John finally spoke. "How much?" She turned, confused. "What? How much do you owe? The rent you couldn't pay, the loans, all of it. How much?" Patricia's face went pale. "I'm not asking you for money, Mr. Sanders. That's not why I told you. I didn't ask if you were asking. I asked how much." She swallowed hard. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. $43,000, give or take. John pulled out his phone. "Get back inside, both of you. Mr. Sanders, that car isn't running tonight." Patricia stood frozen by the car door, her hand still gripping the handle like it was the only solid thing in a world that had stopped making sense. "I don't understand. You're not sleeping in that car tonight." John was already texting, his thumbs moving across the screen with the same precision he used for everything else, or any other night. "Mr. Sanders, I appreciate the offer, but we can't accept." "It's not an offer." He looked up from his phone. "I need someone on site. Full-time. The night staff leaves at 11, and no one's here until 6. That's 7 hours where this place is vulnerable." Patricia blinked. "You want me to, what, be a security guard?" "I want you to live here, manage the house, make sure things run smoothly." He was making it up as he went, but the logic was sound enough. The mansion was too big, too empty. His regular staff came and went. No one actually lived here except him. Room and board included, salary on top of that. "I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about managing. You've been coordinating catering shifts, hiding a child, and surviving homelessness all at once. I think you can handle making sure my house doesn't fall apart." John's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "The guest suite on the 2nd floor. 3 rooms. Your own bathroom. I'll have someone bring your things up." Patricia shook her head, tears starting to stream down her face now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I know what it's like to be hungry. Because I built an empire and somehow forgot what it was for. Because your daughter offered me her food and I haven't felt human in 20 years. He didn't say any of that. Because you're a good worker and I need someone reliable." He held out a key, one of the spares his housekeeper kept in the office. "Take it." Patricia stared at the key like it might bite her. "Mr. Sanders, if this is some kind of, it's employment, that's all." His voice went hard, the tone he used when negotiations were over. "You'll work. You'll be paid. Your daughter will have a roof over her head and food that doesn't come from the trash. Those are the terms." 2 of his security guys appeared from around the corner. Marcus and Tony, both big guys who looked more confused than threatening when John gestured to the sedan. "Everything in that car needs to be in the guest suite in 20 minutes. Carefully. There's a kid's stuff in there." Marcus peered through the window at the pile of belongings. "Boss? This is 20 minutes." They moved immediately, opening the trunk. John turned back to Patricia and pressed the key into her palm, closing her fingers around it. "Nancy needs sleep. Real sleep. In a real bed. Stop being stubborn and let her have that. Patricia looked down at the key, then at the car where her daughter was already drifting off under the blankets. When she looked back up at John, something in her face had shifted from fear to something closer to disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. The guest suite was bigger than any apartment Patricia had ever rented. Nancy stood in the middle of the bedroom, her pink dress wrinkled and her eyes wide as she took in the queen-sized bed, the actual closet, the window that looked out over the garden, lit by security lights. John had meant to drop them off and leave. Let them settle in, give them space. But Nancy had other plans. "Mr. Giant?" She was standing in the doorway as he turned to go, one hand gripping the frame. "Can I ask you something?" Patricia appeared behind her immediately. "Nancy, Mr. Sanders has been very kind, but he's busy." "It's fine." John stopped, turned around. Nancy's question was written all over her face, the same curiosity every kid had when they saw him. The difference was, most kids asked their parents. Nancy was asking him directly, "What do you want to know?" Nancy stepped closer, her small feet padding across the carpet. "Why do you have so many drawings on you? Did they hurt?" John's jaw tightened. He'd spent 20 years perfecting the art of using his tattoos as armor, something to make people look away, to remind them what he was. No one asked him about them anymore. They just knew. He crouched down so he was at her level, same as he'd done in the kitchen. Up close, he could see her fighting to keep her eyes open, exhaustion pulling at her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They hurt, every single one. Why did you do it then?" Patricia moved to intervene, but John held up a hand. "It's okay." He looked at Nancy, at those eyes that had seen too much for 7 years but somehow still had curiosity left in them. "I got them to remember things. People I knew, places I'd been, mistakes I made." Nancy tilted her head. "Mommy says mistakes are how we learn. Your mommy's smart. Can I see one up close?" John hesitated. He'd unbuttoned his jacket at some point during the night, and his shirt was open enough to show the ink crawling up from his chest. The dragon. One of the first ones he'd gotten, back when he was young and stupid, and thought looking dangerous meant being dangerous. He pulled his collar aside slightly so she could see it better, scales and fire and claws wrapped around his collarbone. Nancy leaned in, her finger hovering over the design like she was afraid to actually touch it. "Can I?" No one had touched his tattoos in years. Not voluntarily. Not with anything other than fear or disgust. "Go ahead." Her finger traced the dragon's wing, feather-light, following the curves of ink embedded in his skin. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Like a storybook. You're like a storybook, Mr. Giant." Something cracked in John's chest. Something that had been frozen solid for longer than he could remember. "Cool," Nancy said, pulling her hand back with a yawn. She looked up at him with complete sincerity. "You're really cool." John waited until Nancy was asleep before he asked Patricia for the details. They stood in the hallway outside the suite, voices low, the kind of conversation that required distance from innocent ears. "The loans," he said. "Who?" Patricia looked exhausted, like the weight of the day had finally caught up to her. "It doesn't matter. I'll pay them back. Now that I have steady work I can—" "Who, Patricia?" She sighed, pulling a crumpled envelope from her pocket. The paper was worn thin from being folded and unfolded too many times. John took it, scanning the letterhead. "Fast Cash Solutions. Interest rate, 48%. Late fees stacking on late fees." The original loan had been $8,000. They'd turned it into 30. They said it was the only place that would approve me without a credit check. Patricia's voice was hollow. "I needed first and last month's rent. I thought I could pay it back in 6 months. But then the car broke down, and Nancy got sick, and—" John was already pulling out his phone. "Address? Mr. Sanders, you don't have to." "Address, Patricia," she told him. "A strip mall on the south side, sandwiched between a pawn shop and a check-cashing place. The kind of neighborhood that preyed on desperation." "Get some sleep," John said, pocketing his phone. "I'll handle this. It's almost 2 in the morning. Then they'll be very surprised to see me." Fast Cash Solutions didn't keep overnight hours, but John knew how these operations worked. There was always someone in the back, counting money, cooking books, doing the kind of business that couldn't happen during daylight. The front door was locked, but the security was a joke. One call to Marcus, and they were inside. The man behind the desk was exactly what John expected. Cheap suit, cheaper cologne, the kind of smile that promised help while picking your pocket. That smile disappeared the second he saw who'd just walked into his office. Mr. Torino. The name came out strangled. Wrong name, but close enough that the man knew exactly what kind of trouble he was in. We weren't expecting. John dropped Patricia's loan paperwork on the desk. Patricia Thompson, you're done with her. The man's eyes darted to the papers, then back to John. Sir, I understand you're concerned, but we have a legal contract. You have a predatory loan that should be illegal. John leaned forward, his tattooed hands flat on the desk. And now you're going to forgive it. All of it. Plus any other loans you have on file that look like this. I can't just... You can. John's voice dropped lower, the tone that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Or I can make some calls, have people look into your business practices, your licensing, your taxes. He paused. Your family. The man went pale. That's 48% interest. You're a loan shark in a rented office. Don't pretend you're anything else. John straightened. Patricia Thompson's debt is cleared. Tonight. And if I hear you've contacted her again, for any reason, we'll have another conversation. One that doesn't end with you walking away. Silence filled the small office. The man reached for his computer with shaking hands. I'll process the cancellation right now. Good choice. 1 month later, John walked through his front door at 7 in the evening and heard something he'd never heard in this house before. Laughter. It was coming from the kitchen, Nancy's high-pitched giggle mixing with Patricia's tired but genuine amusement. He followed the sound like a man drawn to a light he didn't know he'd been searching for. Nancy was standing on a step stool at the counter, her hands covered in flour, attempting to roll out what might have been pizza dough but looked more like an abstract sculpture. Patricia stood beside her, trying to guide her daughter's hands while suppressing a smile at the absolute chaos they'd created. Flour dusted every surface, including Nancy's face and hair. Mom, it's supposed to be a circle, Nancy protested, poking at the lopsided blob of dough. Circles are overrated. We're making artisanal pizza. Patricia looked up and spotted John in the doorway. Mr. Sanders, I didn't hear you come in. Nancy wanted to try making dinner tonight, and I thought, it's fine. John set his jacket on the back of a chair, the same chair Patricia had sat in that first night, the one where she'd barely eaten. She looked different now, healthier. The hollowness in her cheeks had filled out. She smiled more easily. Nancy spun around on her step stool, flour flying. Mr. Giant, do you like pizza? He'd told her 3 times to call him John. She'd ignored him every single time. I like pizza. Good. Because you're eating ours even if it looks weird. Nancy turned back to her dough with renewed determination. Mom says presentation doesn't matter if it tastes good. Your mom's right about a lot of things. Patricia's cheeks flushed slightly, and she went back to helping Nancy shape the dough into something vaguely circular. John watched them work. These 2 people who'd been eating garbage off his floor a month ago, now running his kitchen like they'd always belonged here. The house had changed. Small things at first, fresh flowers in the entryway, windows that actually got open to let air in, the smell of real cooking instead of catered events. Patricia had taken the job seriously, turning the cold mansion into something that almost felt lived in. But it was the big things that got to John. The way Nancy's artwork covered the previously bare refrigerator, the way she'd started leaving books on the couch in the library, claiming her territory 1 chapter at a time, the way she ran to greet him when he came home, like his arrival was something worth celebrating. You should wash up, Patricia said, sprinkling cheese over the misshapen pizza. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Dinner. Not a meal, not food. Dinner. The kind with a table and conversation and people who waited for you. John Sanders, who'd built an empire on fear and violence, who'd never thought he deserved anything soft or good, nodded and headed upstairs to wash the day off his hands. When he came back down, they were waiting for him.